Today we're talking about bacteria, pesticides and other dangerous chemicals that you absolutely must wash off your produce before cooking. Or do you? Recently, I made a video about roasting vegetables. And I mentioned that I don't wash vegetables with crevices, like broccoli, cauliflower and Brussels sprouts, because water gets trapped in them and impedes browning. Many of you asked, well, what about pesticides? What about bacteria? Am I only buying organic produce? Lots of great questions, so let's unpack this. Washing produce is one of those common sense things that no one ever questions. Now, interestingly, for years we were told not to wash mushrooms, and somehow we never questioned that wisdom. But not to wash cauliflower, well, that's just criminal. If that's how you feel about washing produce, I have great news for you. You can wash all those water-trapping vegetables and still produce great browning. Thank you to all my viewers who suggested using a salad spinner. You know, I never thought about using it for non-leafy vegetables. Well, thanks to you, I tried it and it worked great. You cut up your vegetables, put them into a salad spinner, submerge it in water, drain the water, and spin it dry. You might need to remove some of the vegetables to make your salad spinner close comfortably. I found it most effective if I gave the spinner a few turns to remove most of the water. Pour this water off so that it doesn't weigh down the spinner, and then give it a thorough spin to remove as much water as possible. The best way to remove the remainder of the surface moisture is to wrap the vegetables in a paper towel and place them in a container overnight. This will produce the driest surface, but requires planning ahead. Alternatively, you can line a baking sheet with a paper towel, lay out the vegetable on the paper towel and let it sit for at least 5 minutes to let the paper towel soak up the remaining moisture. These vegetables browned perfectly, every bit as good as my unwashed ones. And yet, I have a problem with washing. Washing is not free. It adds at least 5 minutes to my prep time. Since I cook about 4 brassicas per week, it's extra 20 minutes per week. And I would like to know what's the return on investment? What exactly are we washing off and how will that make us healthier? Let's start with the easy stuff. A few of you mentioned bacteria. What about all the people who touched those Brussels sprouts in the store with their dirty hands? What if they coughed or sneezed or dropped that produce on the floor? No, sounds bad, doesn't it? But I am not planning to eat this produce raw. Cooking will kill all bacteria and viruses. Flu, COVID, salmonella, E. coli, plague, all gone. You really don't need to worry about any of it if you're planning to cook the produce. Now, raw is a completely different story. I wash everything I plan to serve raw. That being said, I don't have any rosy illusions that it will keep me completely safe. If that lettuce is contaminated with E. coli, I'm screwed because no amount of washing might be sufficient to remove it. Raw produce is one of the riskiest foods and it's responsible for the majority of foodborne illness. But for cooked produce, bacteria and viruses are not an issue. Some of you reported seeing the pesticides on your produce and said that your water turns oily after soaking the vegetables. That's not likely to be pesticides, my friends. This is called waxy bloom. It's a naturally occurring waxy layer that is produced by the plant itself. It locks in moisture and shields the plant from insects and bacteria. It is completely harmless and edible. And yes, it can create an oily residue in your water when you wash your vegetables. Based on what I've read in the comments, many of my viewers assumed that I was buying organic produce. Okay, well, if I am buying from a local farm, it might be organic. But when I shop at a supermarket, which I do most of the year, my produce is conventional. To help me wrap my head around pesticides, I contacted my friend Ken Drouillard. He's a professor of toxicology at the University of Windsor. Ken explained to me that the biggest difference was not between conventional and organic produce, but between conventional produce before 1970s and conventional produce after 1970s. That's when truly toxic pesticides like DDT and dieldrin were banned. So lucky for us that we live in the 21st century. The modern pesticides have a much shorter half-life. In the US, produce is regularly tested by EPA to check that the levels of toxins are below very conservative limits. Are they testing it after washing? No, they're testing the produce the way it appears in the supermarket. The chemical residue on your produce will vary from sample to sample because it depends on when exactly the chemicals were applied. Let's take broccoli as an example. A common insecticide used on broccoli is Permethrin. If you live in the Northeast, you are probably familiar with it. That's the stuff we spray on our clothes to keep ticks away and on our backyards to keep mosquitoes away. This synthetic insecticide mimics the natural product made by chrysanthemum flowers. By the time you buy the broccoli, permethrin is normally below detection limits. On the occasions that it is detected, the amount varies between 0.01 and 100 micrograms per gram of broccoli. So let's consider the worst case scenario. If you are unlucky enough to buy that rare broccoli with the highest amount of permethrin, how much of it can you eat safely every day for the rest of your life? According to Environmental Protection Agency, 1.75 portions. According to the more conservative World Health Organization, a third of a portion. And just a reminder that this is every day for the rest of your life. But getting that unlucky broccoli every day for the rest of your life is equivalent to being in a car accident every day for the rest of your life. If we consider a more median level of permethrin of 10 micrograms per gram of broccoli, you can eat 17.5 servings per day according to EPA, or 3.5 portions per day according to the World Health Organization. And even 10 micrograms are not usually detected. Most of the time, permethrin is below 0.01 micrograms. So the good news is that the amount of permethrin on your broccoli is typically very low. The bad news is that you can't wash it off. Permethrin is not water soluble, it's oil soluble. The outer skin of vegetables is oil based. That's why it feels a bit waxy. Have you noticed how water beads off most vegetables? That's why a rinse without a scrub is rarely effective. And how exactly are you going to scrub broccoli? I mean, it's not a potato. Whatever permethrin is left on your broccoli is absorbed by its waxy surface, and no amount of rinsing and soaking will make much of a dent. Now let's look at another chemical commonly used on broccoli. It's a fungicide that I have a hard time pronouncing. This one is more water soluble, so with a lot of rinsing you could reduce its residue. But the odds of a fungicide being sprayed on the day of harvest is extremely low. Most of the time it's applied much earlier, and by the time the broccoli is in your store, it is undetectable. If we consider the worst case scenario, the highest amount of this fungicide that has been reported is 10 micrograms per gram of broccoli. According to the World Health Organization, that's the more conservative recommendation. You could still eat 2 portions of this broccoli every day for the rest of your life without exceeding their daily limit for this chemical. But I want to remind you, this level is extremely unusual. The more typical amount found on broccoli would allow you to eat 70 portions per day. Now let's talk about using baking soda to remove pesticides. It's been recommended by every social media platform and even endorsed by America's Test Kitchen. This idea came out of a University of Massachusetts study. They found that soaking apples for 15 minutes in a 1% baking soda solution tremendously reduced one fungicide and one insecticide commonly used on apples. So what can we learn from this? Does this work on all produce? Do we really need 15 minutes? No, it does not work on all produce. The two chemicals that were evaluated by the study are not used on broccoli, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts. Baking soda might help with the fungicide used on broccoli because it's water soluble, but not with insecticide, Permethrin, since it's a completely different class of chemicals. Where that study might be helpful is with washing other orchard fruit because they tend to use the same group of chemicals. And America's Test Kitchen ran a very useful test to figure out how long do you actually need, because 15 minutes is completely ridiculous. I mean, who will ever do that? They found that swirling grapes for 30 seconds in the baking soda solution was just as effective. Okay, so maybe we aren't removing all pesticides, but at least we're doing something. I mean, every little bit counts, right? Well, in most living systems, that's not true. Say you increase your exercise by 100%. That sounds great, unless, of course, you were exercising 5 times a year. Doing it 10 times a year is still nowhere near the threshold where it can be effective. In most systems, you need to hit a certain threshold to see the difference. Environmental problems are very complex, and I believe that they are best solved on the systemic level. Consider the COVID pandemic. It wasn't solved by masks, it was solved by vaccines. Remember those days of entering a restaurant in a mask and then removing your mask to eat? Was that mask really making anyone safer? Okay, so if you wore a 95 and never took it off in public, sure, that helped. But most of us did what all humans do when they are scared. We engaged in safety theater. We created rituals that made us feel like we were doing something about the problem. And that's just part of being human. So if this little swoosh makes you feel better, go ahead and swoosh. I want to remind you that my laid-back attitude to washing produce only applies to the Brassica family because they rarely contain soil. You don't want to eat soil, both because it has a disgusting texture and because it could have chemicals that you shouldn't be eating. I wash many things very thoroughly. I wash my leeks between every layer. I submerge all my leafy greens in water and spin them dry. I thoroughly scrub all the root veggies underwater. And yes, I even wash mushrooms if they're covered in soil. I'm sure someone will interpret this video as, Helen said you don't need to wash produce. And that is not at all my message. As always, the devil's in the details. Here are more thought-provoking culinary videos for you to check out, and if you are ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in one of my classes.